Welcome, everybody. I'm excited about my guest today. I have Parker Ashley with me. Parker sold Cutco in the summer of 2008 in Walnut Creek, California office with the legendary Carl Gedris. And he went to University of Southern California, graduated with a degree in human biology with an emphasis in applied physiology. And went to work after that point and is now highly successful as the VP of Americas for Darktrace, which is the world leader in cyber AI defense technology. Parker is an expert in sales and highly influential. He's got a lot of great value to share. Parker, Ashley, welcome to the podcast and thank you.
Yeah, Dan, thank you for having me. It is honestly an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate having you here. I'm excited to hear the lessons and insights that you have to share with our audience. Let's take it back to 2008 and just want you to tell us about how you got started with Cutco.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it was a while ago. It's tough to remember, but I do distinctly remember seeing a flyer or some sort of similar ad in my hometown of Walnut Creek, California. I was actually working a job at the local bakery at the time. And I ended up gaining a few pounds from all the cream cheese brownies and the broken cookies and all the breads, so I kind of felt like maybe this is not a place I need to be. And also I was very much attracted to the kind of work your own hours side of the job. And so I answered that call. I figured I could keep my job at the bakery, keep all my cream cheese brownies, and earn some extra cash on the side. And for me, I'm big into modifying cars, so that extra money meant a louder exhaust, and it was a no-brainer. I showed up at the office the next week.
Nice. And so you went into the Walnut Creek office. You worked with Carl Gedris. What are some of the things you remember about your summer experience?
A lot. I'll be honest, it was one of the more transformative few months in my younger years that I remember. I vividly remember the interview and how intensely I focused on keeping eye contact, giving a firm handshake, figuring out how to tie a tie, so on and so forth. And I more so even remember the training once I actually accepted the job and was offered, and how well and structured the training was, and how informative it was. And some of the other lessons are, for example, like the initial nervousness and embarrassment. My first few sales calls that were non-family and friends, and going to door and pitching and getting out of my comfort zone. But doing that created some unbelievable and invaluable confidence in my own abilities, my skills, my confidence in speaking and pitching. And it's something that I think I'll take with me forever, and it really set the foundation for my career today. I also do remember the first order form for a signature set. I don't think I'm ever going to forget that one. Yeah, it was an absolutely invaluable experience for me.
That's awesome. We all definitely remember that first big set sale that we had. I can even still remember it back, a lot longer into the past than when you started. I love, Parker, what you said about confidence creation that came through what you were doing that summer. I feel like there's different places that confidence comes from. Some people have more of it at the outset of their Cutco experience than others. But for a lot of people, confidence grows through when you have success experiences, when you do something and it works and you do well. And in Cutco, reps get a chance to have lots of little success experiences, lots of little wins, whether it's calling somebody and they make an appointment with you, or of course, making a sale, right? Any sale, right, is a small confidence building experience. And people have so many of those over a short period of time that there literally is a transformation in their persona, in their, their confidence that they have over the course of that summer. That is, it really is recognizable from people who know them or from their manager to see the difference from a rep from the beginning of summer to the end of the summer.
Oh, 100%. And I still believe that firmly to this day. I mean, you could see a momentum in a new rep who gets their first win and then compounds in the second win and over and over. And I think it's a lot is to be said about. Well, I'll actually go back to a book that I absolutely love. It's called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's about creating successful habits and applying those. I think that applies across the board, not just to the habits you create, but as you mentioned, the successes you have. And, that confidence can do a lot. I mean, candidly, I remember there was an appointment I had where I'd actually cut myself a little bit. I was newer in the role, but fortunately, I had had so many wins and successes and failures. I didn't miss a beat. I kept on the pitch. I was able to confidently kind of talk my way through it and around it, and I still ended up making the sale. And I don't think I would have had that ability without those that momentum and those opportunities to see myself win in that way.
Yeah, exactly. Um, no matter what we do, we're always going to have adversities or things that come up that don't go the way we want them to go. And that's also something that I think that, as Cutco reps, people get to practice dealing with those small things and overcoming them and, moving forward with confidence and positive expectations. So good stuff. That's cool. How about tell us, Parker, about your path after college before you got to Darktrace?
Yeah, quite an unorthodox route. I was always very mission driven, and I actually wanted to be a doctor since I was probably 16. And I was hell bent on that mission after college. I applied and I took the MCAT. I interviewed for medical schools. I was actually accepted in a few schools, and then, kind of decided that the industry wasn't really what I had been intentioned, and so, or what I thought it would be. So, I really liked tech. I really liked that environment. I didn't have the coding skills or desire to take that route, but I did know I was very good at one thing, and that was sales. And so that was my entry point into technology. And I haven't looked back since, to be honest.
I think what you just said describes the experience that a lot of people have after working in Vector is that they, had a path in mind in their life and they realize like, "Wow, I'm good at this. And I could do well here. I could do well in sales. I have the sales has obviously almost an unlimited opportunity for most people. Um,
Yeah.
and it's cool to see that you have had such great success. What has been like the transformative moment in your sales career?
I don't think that there's been a single one, to be honest. I do think that realizing early on in the Cutco days that I could trade dollars for value rather than dollars for time was a big mental shift for me, to be honest. Um, but I think just the many successes and failures that I've had in a very short order of time by that exposure, by getting those wins and piling those up, I think I've been fortunate to learn from many of them. There's not been a single one, and they've kind of shaped my career. That said, other than the value for money bit, I do think that the first time I ever held a 5-figure check in my career, and I had it in my hands, I looked at it. I mean, it was unbelievably eye-opening to me. It was mind-blowing to see that much money at one page at the time, and little did I know that, I was still on the bottom floor of what was possible in a career where you can kind of control your income based on the effort you put in.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. What do you feel are the personal characteristics that you have brought to the table that have enabled you to have had such great success and advancement in your sales career?
It's a good question. I think at the base level, I'm a really intensely curious person. So I love just digging down, asking tons of questions, seeking knowledge, learning. I think that alone has allowed me to constantly stay on top of my game and just, never be satisfied with the answers I know at that moment. And I think that's helped me in tech specifically, where I'm just naturally inclined to understand how things work to the point where I can easily explain it. And little did I know how valuable that would be in a sales profession. But I think it stemmed from, when I was a kid, I was taking stuff apart, putting it back together. And I don't know, maybe I should have been an engineer, but I think that curiosity has helped me a lot. And then I think the second side to that is grit. I always tout that grit has really helped me see things through and push through to success. And I think sales, especially when you're in like a hyper growth startup environment, or you're going door to door and you're by yourself, it requires some serious long term mental fortitude. If you don't have the grit to keep moving forward, even after you've taken a few haymakers to the face, I mean, it's going to be tough to succeed. So I think those two skills, if you get those right, you're well ahead of the game.
Where do you feel your grit came from?
I like to color it as grit. It's probably just stubbornness. I actually am a relatively indecisive person, believe it or not. But I do have the quality that whenever I make my mind, that's it. That's what I'm doing. That period. Even the med school, back to the med school days, like I decided that was what I was going to do until the very moment where I had to decide if I wanted to take out a $250,000 loan. uh, I do think it came a lot from my father. He's a very successful news anchor in the Bay Area, and he's been to this day, I think he's the longest running news anchor at that station in Bay Area history
Is your
for almost
father
30
Dan?
years. He is Dan.
Oh yeah, of course I've seen him on TV. That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so I think just he's been just sticking through that career for years, and is really the last of kind of the breed of this is my path, and this is what I'm going to do, and sticking it through despite the changes in the industry. And I think I've learned a lot from watching him over the years.
Yeah. Is he doing newscasts like from his house now? Has he been
That's a
doing
good.
them?
He's well, like me, he's stubborn. So he's one of the few that's actually going into the studio.
Oh, he
So
goes in every time.
it's just
I
him. It's a little weird, but
I can never tell if they're in if they're in their studio, if they're in their house with a virtual background, like it's hard to tell. So
yeah, they do a good job. I mean, he's by himself in the studio. Most of the other anchors, I think, have opted to work from home. But he loves going in. I think again, he's just stubborn that way. Once he sets his habits in motion, that's it.
yeah. Well, that's cool. That's interesting. So grit obviously is a key factor for success, particularly in sales. I love what you said about curiosity, because for anybody in sales, having a genuine curiosity leads to some really good outcomes. One of the things I think it leads to is greater understanding of
Yes.
other people, and
Yes.
that's an important trait, not just in sales, but in life in general. It's important in relationships, it's important in influencing other people, whether directly in sales or not. And so that genuine curiosity leads to that. Also, I feel like being a curious person helps lead people to truth as well,
Yes.
which I think is an important trait in life. If you're not curious, it's easy to sort of be stuck in a certain way of thinking, and we all sort of adopt a lot of beliefs that one of my old mentors would say started out our beliefs start out like cobwebs, but then they become like chains or shackles that
Yep.
will hold you back oftentimes. But when you're curious, when you're always curious and you're asking questions and you're constantly learning, I think you have a great opportunity to evolve as a human being. So not just a trait for sales, but for life in general.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that curiosity will force you naturally out of your comfort zone. The nature of being curious and asking the question is going to force you into some course of action. And you may decide quickly that direction is not where you're meant to head. But at least now you've scratched that itch. But the constants of those actions will eventually lead, I think, a lot of people on a really, really powerful path, not just on a micro scale within their careers, or helping a client or whatever the case is, but more broadly in life, and trying to understand the path they're meant to be on, and the passions that they're meant to create and uphold.
Yeah. Yep. Very good. Now, you also, I've seen something that you wrote about the top 10 traits of
Mm.
successful sales reps. You ranked them in order. In fact, I thought that was a pretty hard list to put into order. You certainly had curiosity and you had grit on there. Your top two were empathetic and coachable. Why don't
Yep.
you tell us a little bit about those traits and how they lead to success in sales?
Yeah, I think honestly, these are the things, those traits in that order, I kind of feel like had helped me a lot. I happen to be better at some than I am in others. Um, but I think the reason I listed them the way I did is it was what I saw, the traits that I saw in the most successful salespeople around me, both at my current organization and my peers in different organizations. First and foremost, they genuinely care about the customer, and their problems. They really do, and they're more than willing to, you know, go the extra mile to kind of understand that customer and try to kind of live a day in their shoes, if it were, to really understand the problem that they need to help solve for that client. Um, and I also think from a coachable perspective, that same person is also willing to be a little bit more introspective, and they're willing to admit when they don't know what they're doing enough to take feedback and direction necessary to master the skills required to go back and help that customer. So I almost think the
Hmm.
two are related in a way. And then finally, like I mentioned before, that they're curious enough to ask questions about their product to their mentors, to their leaders, and to the customer for purposes of diagnostics. And all of these things, to me, are kind of interwoven. And I see time and time again a rep that gets those three things down. They're typically already several steps ahead of the rest of the pack, and then the rest is all just skill building. But those are harder skills, I think, to build, and they're more of a mentality than anything else.
Yeah, I like what you just said about these are a mentality. I do think that these traits start with a decision. I think, for
Yes.
example, when you talked about being willing to admit when someone needs help, I think everyone should ponder in their life, right? Do I want to fight through my challenges in life on my own through my own personal experience? Do I want to struggle and beat my head into a wall? Or do I want to be able to open myself up to have humility and open myself up to all the feedback that I can get from others, and then ponder that feedback and decide, which pieces of feedback do I feel like are helpful, which are not? What do I want to implement? What do I want to toss out? But just starting with that decision that you're going to be an open person to receive input from other people, and learning when you receive that input to be appreciative and grateful, not to be critical back when somebody gives you a piece of criticism, but instead to take it in and say, hey, thanks for that. That
Yes.
leaves those doors open for consistent, great dialogue with other people in your life that can help you to grow and advance more quickly.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that is ultimately, as you mentioned, a decision you make, to be open and to admit fault or admit defeat. And there's a book called Extreme Ownership, by a couple of Navy SEALs, Jocko and Leaf, and it's really a leadership book. It's a fantastic one at that. But really, the lesson learned there is you could free up so much mental space to grow and learn by just owning the things that you either control or should control, or the things that are at your fault. Just owning it, just moving beyond it. Hey, that's on me, but let me learn, let me open up and understand where I could solve and look for solutions to improve. And I think that decision to think in that way, it is paramount, to somebody developing in their career and their maturity.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting that your choice of sales versus getting into medicine, that if a flashpoint for that was considering the $250,000 incursion of debt, right? And instead you quickly received a 5-digit paycheck on the other side of the coin, and I'm sure have had many more since then. And there's a big difference between a bunch of 5-digit paychecks and a statement that shows 6 digits of debt or more.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah. And I mean, and for me, it was about, I think it comes down to the curiosity bit, and taking actions in different directions, and trying to understand passions. And, at the end of the day, I think anybody can be passionate about what they're really good at. And I think you find a passion in the things that you like. And I loved the science of medicine, and I loved the STEM and all of the research and biology, and I really liked that. But I knew I knew I didn't like the industry, and to put it on top of that, then you've got this huge debt bubble that you've got to break. And then the moment I looked the other direction, I'm like, okay, well, hey, if I'm not going to be a doctor, I better find a pretty viable solution elsewhere. And I knew from my experience at Cutco that, you know what, I could make my own luck. I don't have to just take any job that will pay me anything. I could go and make my own income if I choose this route and I just double down. And man, I'll be honest, it panned out in a really positive way.
Yeah. Well, that's really great to hear. You've got this background in science. I know you're interested in data analytics as well. Does that stuff inform some of your current business strategies?
uh, yes, in a weird roundabout way. I think my unorthodox background has kind of helped me approach the business world from a different perspective, which is always super valuable. And I think a story I've written about this in the past, but the importance of preparation, especially in sales, and as it's a performance and things like that. Um, this background goes all the way back to that. For exams and things like that, I would prepare in a different capacity than I think most people did. For the MCAT, for example, I quite literally took a timed exam. I think I took about 10 to 15 timed MCAT exams, but I went beyond that. I actually set up a room with similar fluorescent lighting that I knew the testing facility would have. I opened up a computer with similar parameters. I was blocked in. I would start at the exact same time the test starts. I would walk the same distance from that I knew my hotel would be from the testing facility in the morning, all to just mentally prepare myself to be in this mindset. And I think that that alone and things to understanding these techniques has allowed me to be really really prepared in my sales career as well, and in my business career, from like a habits perspective. And then on top of that, you know, I, I worked in a biomechanics lab before making the transition to my current working field while I was applying to med schools. And being able to come from a thought process that's hypothesis based, and the ability and kind of desire to test different techniques, be hyper data driven with my decisions, that has really allowed me to effectively analyze troughs of data and identify trends within our business and customers' businesses in order to effectively implement processes, training, programs, accelerate growth in certain areas, so on and so forth. I genuinely believe that I wouldn't have been able to think in those ways if it weren't for that background. And I know that was a longer answer, but I think it was invaluable.
I think that's great what you just shared right there, Parker. There's so many times in life where people just sort of trust their instinct or their own personal experience in making decisions, and there's some good parts to that, and there's some truth to trusting your instincts. But when you can have clear data, when you can really get to what the truth of the matter is, it helps a lot with decision making.
Yep.
We've seen this whole issue come to the forefront here in the last 1 year with the pandemic, right? It's like at the start of the pandemic, most of our decisions were colored by whatever we believed, right? I was one of those people who thought, oh, you know what? We've been through this like 5 times before. It never has amounted to anything. Like,
Yep.
I'm also very optimistic and thought, whatever, even if this is serious, like we'll get over it within like, a month or two. And so my
Right.
decisions and my actions were all colored by that belief early on. And it took an overwhelming amount of data shoved in my face to get me to believe otherwise. Um, but a lot of people ignore that data. They ignore, the actual reality. And I think that happens in our business too. Like we have a lot of young
Yeah.
entrepreneurs that are confident and ambitious and like think they know what they're doing all the time, and they do things because it feels like it's the right thing to do, or my experience tells me this is the right thing to do. But we have an opportunity, even our business, to gather a lot of data very specific data about our recruiting processes or our training or our sales reps on appointments or whatever, that help inform what actually is working and what we actually should be doing. So I
100%.
feel like this side of things is a key element of being good in sales or in anything, is having an openness to that side of gathering data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you could even for an individual sales rep, you don't have to think about leveraging data from this big business shifting perspective. I applied it to myself individually when I was a rep. I looked at, hey, what's my quota? What's my target number? And then I looked at the data. I looked at, okay, what are my average meetings per week? What's my average conversion on those? How much do I typically convert from a dollar value on those meetings or from those opportunities or whatever the case is? And I could use that to work all the way backwards to break down my goals financially or otherwise into repeatable daily habits that are data driven, that I know if repeated over the quarter are going to drive those goals based on the data, and probably even better because I would have improved in the process as well. So we're on the same page. I think it's invaluable.
Yeah. And you've read Undoing Project and Thinking Fast and Slow?
I have both fantastic. Thinking Fast and Slow is a particular favorite of mine.
It's so fascinating. Yeah. And it is a tome also to
Yeah.
get through. Like that book is takes a long, long, long time to get through. You got to go through it very slowly and deliberately, I feel like, to get everything. So,
Dense, yeah. Have to double back a couple times, which I did. I typically read on a pretty fast pace, but that one I took a little bit of time.
yeah. Um, I think that this this approach to preparation, detail orientation, some of the things that you talked about, leads me to want to ask you about habits and routines. Do you have daily habits and routines that you follow that have helped you be successful?
Yeah, 100%. I feel you sensed a theme there in a lot of my responses. I'm constantly evolving this to fit my situation and goals, but this is a non-negotiable for me, and it has become one over the last few years. And in fact, one of the most valuable tools that I've added to my arsenal, and that's my morning routine. And it actually started after reading Miracle Morning by, I believe, another Cutco alum, Hal Elrod, if you know. So
Of
he
course.
coined, yeah, if I think everybody listening to this podcast, or most, should know who Hal Elrod is. If you don't, please go look him up. But he coined the term savers, which is silence, affirmations, vision, exercise, reading, scribing. And I work against that to some level. Every morning, I know that if I win my morning mentally, I've already started winning my day. I'm already ahead of the game, and no matter what happens in the chaos and the throes of the day ahead, I'm on my page from the start. And so typically I'll wake up at 5:45, 6. I'm not one of those like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. people. Like I can't do it. But 5:45, 6 serves plenty fine for my purposes. I immediately get moving, break a sweat for 20 minutes, anything that I can do to kind of get active. Then I do a little bit of mobility and stretching, meditation, affirmations, super important. Being starting with some gratitude, getting your mindset in a positive place, doing some affirmations and vision setting, reminding yourself on where the long term is 3, 5 years ahead and what you're going to do that day, the 3 to 5 things that are really, really important for you to do that day to make those goals a reality. And then I always read. I have to read in the morning. It gets me thinking in a right way. And I love to read. And then from there, I'll go ahead and I'll review my plan for the day, which I typically lined up the night before. And I'll get moving. But I think the greatest thing in there, and something I candidly didn't start doing in probably 6 months ago, is I don't check email and ideally my phone for at least the first hour after I wake up.
Mm.
And the reason being, I noticed that if I start my day and immediately open up my email, I'm allowing an external force to grab a hold of my mental state before I can. And that is unacceptable to me. And so if I can avoid that, then at least I control my mental output for that day. And then I can deal with whatever problems are waiting in my inbox.
That was so profound what you just said right there, that by getting if you were to get your day started with email or your phone, you're allowing an external force to affect you
Correct.
versus taking control of how you're starting your day, right? By leveraging some of those other concepts, some of the things that you learned from Hal, et cetera. Um,
It,
that that was really, really powerful for anybody to think about. I don't even think that applies only to the morning, but throughout your day, how often are you allowing an external force to affect you, right? If you're taking a mental break in the middle of your day, taking a mental break that's something productive like a walk or you know some type of meditation or something like that, versus a mental break where you're opening up your Instagram and you're doing the scroll, right? And whatever's there is what's going
yep.
to impact you, and you might see something that impacts you negatively. um, that's a really powerful insight for people to ponder. I like that.
Yeah, 100%. And it was very transformative for me when I made that realization that like, to your point, anything could disrupt your day. It could be bad news. It could be something going on in the world, which we know after last year could be quite literally anything at this point. And just allowing that to take control. And I actually like what you said about being conscious of that throughout the day as well. And it's helpful to I block 30 minutes on my calendar, typically for lunch every day, but I'll use that to exercise or meditate or just reset and flush my brain from things that may have come in and are swirling around, and try to kind of recenter. Because to your point, anything could disrupt that flow, and it's important that you find that center again really quickly. And there's, I think, I can't remember exactly, but I think it's something to the order of, there's if you had $86,000 in your bank account, and somebody stole 10, would you throw out the other $86,000? And the answer is no, logically. But we often do the same thing. There's 86,400 seconds in a day, and we often will throw out the rest of our day because of one thing that happened for 10 seconds. Somebody cuts us off in traffic, we get a bad email, whatever the case is. Why do we let that control the rest of our day? And I think it comes from a similar place.
Yeah, exactly. That's powerful. For anybody listening, episode number 156 of the podcast was Hal Elrod talking about the miracle morning specifically. And I'll also add that Hal Elrod was the very first interview I ever recorded for this podcast. I
Wow.
released it as episode 4, but it was the very first one I ever recorded. And in that one, he talks about the miracle equation, which is his latest book that sort of comes after the miracle morning. So Hal is an amazing ambassador of the Cutco Vector business, and has become uber successful with the miracle morning and all of its offshoots. So the miracle morning movie just came out, Parker, on December 12th.
Did it? I
Yeah.
heard about that. I heard they were filming that, but I didn't
Yeah.
I didn't understand it or didn't realize it released. That's amazing.
Yeah. You got to check that out. Um,
Where is it? Where did they release it?
Yeah, I just bought a ticket so that I had access to the
Ah,
live premiere, basically, where Hal like was speaking in the morning, and then the movie played, and then Hal came back on and was speaking afterwards.
oh,
So,
cool.
but I'm sure you can find it by looking at Google Miracle
Quick
Morning
Google.
Movie, and it'll figure out. I'm sure you can figure out how to have it pop up. I want to ask you about another insight that I've seen you share,
Yeah.
which I think is really important for young people to hear, because you're 30 years old. I assume that you're highly successful, from a financial point of view at this point. And the as somebody's income grows, I think it's important for their spending to grow more slowly. And you talked about, in something you wrote, the opportunity cost of lifestyle creep. Could you unpack that
Yep.
briefly?
Yeah, man, 100%. I'm really happy you brought this up. I'm a huge personal finance and investment geek, and it's one of my passions that I think about often on the side. And if I get super excited here, I apologize. No one ever wants to talk about this stuff, but something I really believe in. And I agree with you that it's very important, especially for younger folks and people earlier in their career, I think for me, I was very fortunate. I was taught to some degree the value of time and money early on. Probably not as in depth as as what's possible, but at least I had some awareness of it. But most young people aren't really taught from a financial perspective, at least, how valuable their time really is and the impact on things like compound interest and things like that. They hear about it anecdotally, but they're never really taught this practically. And I believe this is changing a lot. But one of the biggest things that I see in it, I lived in Los Angeles, which is probably the epicenter of keeping up with the Joneses, no shade on any of my Angelinos or anything like that, but it's very much an environment where you're constantly trying to keep up with the pressure and show off. And I think for a long time, that's been the mentality: is you get a raise, you get a bonus. Great, you could go buy that nice new car or upgrade your apartment or whatever the case is. And this is really prevalent in sales, because you'll have these individuals who work in purely commission, or maybe they have a base salary and they have a bonus on top of it. And suddenly they get this, these big chunks of money. It's big windfall, similar to myself when I saw that check for the first time. If I hadn't had the wherewithal to know what to do with that money, I would have spent it. I would have bought a car. I would have, bought a depreciating asset or something that would have hurt me long term. But with lifestyle creep, if you can understand that, if you could find an area where you are very comfortable living, you're not overreaching, where you are happy, you have everything you need, you're not overextending, you're not buying things that you really don't need, you're not keeping up with the Joneses. If you could find an area where you are happy, just stay there. And the benefit of that is, if you could become comfortable with that and not budge, every time you get a promotion, every time you get a raise, every time you get a larger bonus check than you anticipated, if you invest that money and have it working for you, the cost is enormous. And I think I did a write-up where, assuming like I believe a $50,000 salary and a 3% raise every year, and if you were to, say, do the smart thing and invest 10% of your money every year without fault, you would end up with after 30 years, with a pretty modest about $1 million in retirement, if you were to kind of follow that 10% rule. However, on the other end of the extreme, if you were to instead stay at that single cost of living and invest the difference of what you were given from a raise every year, year over year, which would be more than that 10% over time, you'd end up with $3 million. So that value of compound interest is huge. And it's important that I think young people understand that. They understand that they don't need to buy that nice new car, that fancy watch, or whatever the case is, right away. And if they get that money working for them earlier, they'll have many more opportunities in the future, so much more. And I think that delayed gratification is big. And listen, I bought the watch. I've had some of the cool toys. I'm a huge car guy, as I mentioned. I think you could still have fun and do this. You don't have to, go to the extreme of the FIRE group and live in a shed until you're 40 or whatever. But I think just knowing the power of that compounding interest and the power and the value of that time is something that I wish were taught in schools more often.
Yeah, you just said something about it being taught in schools. I was just thinking, man, this is exactly what people need to hear in school. My financial advisor shares a concept he calls the gap. And the gap is the
Mm,
difference between your earning and your spending. And that
yep.
gap should get wider and wider and wider as you go along, right? You can't have a parallel line up of your spending as your earnings goes up. There has to be a wider and wider and wider gap. And if you're doing that, then you are balancing some gratification now, some of the nice
Yep.
things, some of rewarding yourself,
Yep.
with that idea of being able to be much more secure at an earlier stage in your later life, and have more of the rewards in the long term of life that you can get. So I think that's a great concept
Yep.
that people should hear. I appreciate hearing that from a young, very successful, leader like you.
Yeah.
Um,
And I love the gap. I think that's a great analogy. I'll have to steal that from you if you don't mind.
yeah, take it, take it. Parker, why do you feel like sales is such a great career?
Oh man, several reasons. I think I could go on for a while. I'll keep it short, but I mean, I could hit you with all the stats about, I think it's something on the order of 25% of CEOs or some order of magnitude came from a sales and marketing background, and many entrepreneurs come from a similar background. But I think fundamentally, sales affords you flexibility, both financially and from the perspective of a career path. It gives you the flexibility to kind of control your destiny like no other career. I think it's also incredibly rewarding. The opportunity to solve problems for a living effectively can be incredibly rewarding and stimulating. And I think most importantly, it's so essential to gain experience in, because it builds critical soft skills such as the ability to present, speak with confidence, formulate ideas or thought around value, so on and so forth. And I think that no matter where you are in life and your career, you could always benefit. And it brings me to a book, To Sell Is Human by Daniel Pink, which explores the concept that everybody to some degree is selling something. You're convincing your friends over a certain restaurant. Yeah, you're putting on a pitch a little bit there. So no matter where you are, those skills are incredibly invaluable.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. The control over your destiny is one of the reasons why I've stayed in sales for so long. And definitely that building of soft skills is one of the side benefits that has come along with, putting myself in the position of having to learn how to influence, learn how to lead, learn how to sell, for all these years. And it's a very valuable thing that a lot of the young people that we work in Cutco get to have. And To Sell Is Human is one of my all-time favorite books, by the way. It's so good.
Really, it's amazing book.
Yeah,
Amazing book. Couldn't recommend it
so
enough.
so good. Parker, this has been awesome. I just want to leave with one more question for you, because the theme of our podcast is changing lives, and as you look into your own future, I'm interested to hear how you would aspire to change people's lives through your work or through your influence.
Oh, big task. But for me, for now, I'm really just hoping that as I go along, I want to be able to share what I've learned, and provide mentorship to people who maybe find it inspiring, or see a similar career path in themselves, both in sales and business, but specifically personal growth and finance and mental health. And if I could just help a few people along the way in the short term, it's honestly more than I ever could have asked for now. And then long term, if some of the financial stuff that I'm working on goes the way I planned, I mean, the big goal is to be able to have some sort of foundation and be able to give back in a hugely impactful way, a la Bill Gates or whatever the case is. That's the loftier goal and the vision down the line. But for now, I mean, if I could even help one person sort their finances or get that promotion, that's more than I could have ever asked for.
Fantastic. Well, you're well on your way, Parker. You're a VP at a multi-billion-dollar corporation. That's pretty exciting. You also are frequently giving back to others in terms of your knowledge. I think you're a great follow on LinkedIn. I would really recommend anybody listening that you connect with Parker on LinkedIn. And I notice you posting there pretty much every day, something that's of value. And I appreciate that. It's just great to see the success you're having and the example you're setting for so many other people. I really appreciate having you as a guest on the podcast, Parker. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing what you're doing. I think it's phenomenal. So appreciate it.
Awesome, man. That was Parker Ashley, everyone. Wow, I really enjoyed that conversation. I hope you did too. Cool to hear how, in Parker's early life, his aspiration was to be a doctor, and that this transformed into a desire to get into sales. I think being a doctor, being in any medical profession, is a very gallant and amazing career and vocation and calling. If that's where you are led to, I think that's great. But as Parker referenced, getting into sales offered a lot of great things as well. The control over your destiny that he described, the opportunity to solve problems for a living, and all the skills that come along with dealing with people on a regular basis. and having to learn how to influence. I think that that helps people be better in their relationships, helps people be better as a parent. There's so many things people gain by becoming experts in sales. Parker shared the concept of getting paid for value versus getting paid for time. This is a critical insight for anyone to be able to take in and consider, right? And if you think you get paid for time, well, that's not exactly true. There's sometimes people measure your value by time. But if you stopped bringing value during your hours, you would stop getting paid. They'd fire you. So it's so important to be considering what value are you bringing to the marketplace because of your skills, because of your insights. What is it that's unique about you that helps you become successful? Your personal monopoly is a term that I've heard described a couple times on this podcast now. What is your personal monopoly that enables you to bring value to the marketplace? I love how Parker shared about curiosity being a key skill that he developed, asking questions, genuine interest in other people, developing an understanding of others, humility, all of what goes into that. And of course, grit, right? Having the persistence to work through challenges, to work through times where you don't achieve what you want, right? There's a magic word called until, Jim Rohn says, right? That you work until you've achieved what you want. That's how we learned how to walk as children, right? And it's how many things in life are learned and adapted. Um, Parker talked about daily habits and routines. I like the idea of the miracle morning, of course. But I would encourage each of you to think about this right now. Like, what are the habits in your life that are serving you? And make a list and write those down. And what are the habits in your life that are not serving you, that are holding you back? And decide that you're going to leave in the past today the habits that are not serving you. What are you going to leave in the past today? And what are you going to carry with you into your future to help you become more and more successful and have more and more of what you want? It's clear that Parker is a young man that is applying some solid habits and principles for success. He's advanced very quickly to a elite position at a very young age, and I'm sure that more and greater success lies ahead for him and for many others who adopt a lot of these same principles. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast.